Hello everyone and welcome back to Gammabox. My name is Jack Carr. Welcome back to the most recent episode of our series. Today we're going to be continuing talking about Teams integrated contact centers, specifically within the public sector vertical. Today's episode we're going to be talking about omnichannel, what that means and what it matters to organizations. Today I'm joined by
Robert Jones. I work in the public sector new business sales team, helping customers on board with Gamma.
Tom Hunter, solution consultant in the pre-sales team, specialising in the Teams and telephony side.
Fantastic. And I'm Dan Lloyd. I'm the channel director at Cirrus, and we've been partnering with Gamma for over 5 years now.
Good stuff. Thanks for joining me, guys. So first of all, I'm going to direct this one to you, Dan, as the expert in the room. Could you just break us down? What is omnichannel and what does it comport?
Great question. Start from there. So omnichannel, really, it's a unified platform that has all the different methods of communication within it. So you don't have to go to different platforms to communicate with your customers over SMS, email, WhatsApp. And the different flavors of channels will depend on the supply you go for. And we'll talk about more as we go through this part today. But it's a little bit more than that as well. So not only do you want all those different medias in one place for the agent, you also want to have the ability to switch those channels and to be able to communicate, maybe starting in a web chat conversation, talking to an agent or a customer. That gets too complex, so you move to a voice channel that you can go into a lot more detail a lot quicker. Maybe then there's some files need sharing, you can use email for that, or maybe refer to something on social media. And that means the customer can get their message across really easily. But from the agent perspective, having a true omnichannel platform means that they don't really care what method the customer uses. They can just provide the service they need to provide. And that's what omnichannel really means for us.
Thank you. That's nice and clear. And, Robert, you work very closely with public sector organizations now, right? When it comes to procuring contact centers and the digital channels that customers can interact with these bodies, why does it matter who they buy it from? What does that change for these organizations? Is it better to have, specialist partners for each of these channels, or would having something a bit more simple make a big difference to these end organizations?
So just threading back to the previous podcast that we've done, it's important to have one supplier for all communication channels. The reason why it's important is because it's one platform, it's easy to use, easy to support, and it means that you have one supplier to engage with.
As well as that, is that going to factor into other services that you might buy as well as a contact center? Sometimes these things aren't procured in silos. They may be part of larger projects that might encompass things like back office telephony as well.
Yeah, it is really important that you include back office telephony because you want to be with one supplier for both. Again, for support, but also so it makes it easy for you to be able to transfer calls from the contact center to the back office, and likewise the back office to the contact center. By all means, you can buy them separately, but for the reasons that I've just said, it does make sense if you can to buy them together in one tender.
I think there's a big risk of buying them separately from some of the stuff we first touched upon. If you want to move from one platform to the next to handle a customer query, if you've got separate suppliers, that just simply isn't possible. And then on top of that, you get all the training issues in regards to a different platform will handle things in different ways. It'll look different on the agent screen. Remembering passwords is hard enough as it is. So there's all those issues as well. But also like the central management of it. So as an administrator of the platform, you've got to set up rules and regulations and templates and different even looks and feels of it. If you have to replicate that on every journey, then that just takes far too much time to manage.
So that touches into single sign-on, doesn't it? So when your agent wakes up in the morning and they just want to be able to power up their laptop and they just want to be able to get on with their day supporting their customers and doing a really good job. If you are using multiple applications and platforms, that job is already twice as hard for that agent. And it also means it impacts their ability to work as a hybrid worker as well, which impacts your ability to be able to look after your customers potentially.
And to bring into that, even just buying these solutions, right? Procurement in public sector, it's regimented and it's that way for a good reason. If I'm an organization that has a pressing need to change how my citizens or customers interact with me, I don't necessarily want to go through 5 different procurement processes to buy 5 different channels of interaction. And that even goes into the element of security. Security is probably now more important than ever. And that's not just the applications themselves. That's about vetting the vendors and partners that you work with to make sure that they are robust in their both financial standing as well as being on top of the industry they work in. but making sure that you're doing those due checks. They're not quick things, right? These take time and for good reasons, but making sure that you get those right in a line is really important. And the more you can buy from a single supplier surely means that you've got a better chance of having, a robust supplier relationship that is also secure in nature for technology, as well as the organization and partner that you're working with.
Yeah, we touched on in a previous podcast about picking the right partner, and this is one of the key reasons why you should do that, because you may not be ready for let's say WhatsApp, for example. As we talked about business processes and making sure agents are ready, you may not be ready for it at the time of procurement, but over time you can adapt and maybe see that WhatsApp is really going to add value. If you've got the right partner, they can help you on that journey. So it starts 6 months before you even deploy, you even start thinking about procuring them. You can build those processes, get the training ready, make sure your agents are in the position, and then even turn it on and go. The provision of it's going to be a lot easier with one supplier than it is with a brand new supplier. On top of that as well, not only they could also maybe do proof of concepts, or even suggest that maybe WhatsApp wouldn't work because of X, Y, and Z, but by using Facebook Messenger as a messaging platform, that would work better for you as an organization. So you're not forced into a certain scenario. An expert within the field could maybe suggest alternatives.
Yeah, exactly. I think exactly like you say, it's not only being prepared and having it prepared in X amount of time in advance, it's having the partner who's had the experience of doing these deployments time and time again as well. And again, yeah, time is great, and customers might think they know what they want, but in practice, it's the partner and the experience of that partner that's actually going to shape what is best for their organization, what is going to be best for ultimately their customers at the end of the day.
And Tom, to build into it, I mean, we speak to a lot of organizations that maybe potentially don't really have a formal contact center today. They manage things by central email inboxes, they take voice inquiries via their back office telephony system, and different parts of the business will have different needs for it. What do you think in terms of, is there a one-size-fits-all approach, or should you look into a platform that could maybe deploy different elements for different parts of the business?
There's definitely not a one-size-fits-all, that's for sure. And we touched on this in a previous segment of this podcast as well, in the sense that some customers, like you say, may be using certain applications or potentially Teams native functionality, for example, to take on some of their contact center functionality in inverted commas. But in reality, that might not be fit for purpose, but it's to what extent that is. So there might only be a small part that the native teams can't do, but it's still ultimately contact center functionality that we need to maybe look into. Other people, it's full-blown everything. They want to engage with their customers on all of the different platforms that they can. We need to be and work with a partner that is flexible to meet all of those needs, big to small, from the fairly basic to some of the more complex as well.
And when we look at it, honed in on the UK public sector, now that composes of a few different things, right? But they don't necessarily always interact with their customers or citizens in the way that a private enterprise might do. And that bleeds into how they interact through their contact center platform. Now, question to the room, are there any sort of events in a calendar year where you would expect a public sector organization, be they local authority, higher education, housing association, that sort of thing, where having a flexible omnichannel contact center would be able would allow you to, leverage those omnichannel capabilities in a way that gives a better experience to whoever's trying to contact that organization?
So I can take that. So for local government, it's going to be general elections or council tax bills. That always drives activity. It also can go down to weekly, like bin collection. For 1 week it's recycling, the next week it's your normal waste that's been collected. If your bin's been forgotten, you need to be able to contact the council to get that sorted as quickly as possible, and you want to be able to have various mediums to be able to do that on, so whether it's voice or it's email or it's chat, and the councils want to be able to give their customers the ability to contact them on whatever channel suits them, because we're seeing a rise of the general public who are busy, like the contact centre, and they're pushed for time as well. So they need to be able to contact the council or the housing association, if it's a housing association, when it suits them. And for housing associations, Why do they get busy? It could be that there's been a new directive from the central government that's caused activity in that world or sector, and it's caused an influx of inquiries to the housing association for them to double check how they're going to pay their rent or cover their bills.
I think the key word you said there is flexibility as well. And Robert, you've just mentioned a couple of maybe key events that will happen, but flexibility comes when events, whatever they may be, out of the ordinary happen. That's where the flexibility comes in, and that's why it's so important as well. It's all great planning for what we know is coming up, potentially like an election, for example, but what if, I think you mentioned it previously, what if there is a flood, everything is underwater, the council, for example's contact centre agents are all forced to work from home. They're in the same predicament as the people in their authority as well. They're still able to do their job with the flexibility that the contact center would provide, and the ability to sort of work from anywhere.
And you also see an influx in activity if there's a local issue. So not only is that organisation having to deal with the local issue that's in play, but they're also receiving an influx of queries because people are concerned and they want to get feedback on what they should do. And organisations need to be able to be nimble and respond. In a BAU situation, if you see a spike in services, you want to partner with an organisation that will allow you to increase the number of users on the platform in a second. And that's something that's very important.
It's an interesting point you mentioned there about if a local event happens out of the blue and how you react to it. And one thing I talk a lot about with central government, local government, housing associations is proactive contact. So don't wait for your citizens to contact you and tell you there's a problem. If you know about the problem, start to communicate. And having a true omnichannel platform means you can take advantage of things like Facebook and social media, WhatsApp and SMS, where you can send a message directly to all of your citizens advising that you know about this issue, this is the solution we're working on, this is where you'll get information from. And that stops that influx coming in. And if it is omnichannel, if someone does call off the back of that message, the agent has seen that message and knows why they're contacting. So if a different message goes out for different people, they can see that and react to it and deal with it. And that's the advantage of having that single supplier.
Well, it can be targeted communication as well, can't it? Because it could only be affecting a certain region and not the whole area that organisation looks after. And being with a single supplier means that they can flip to whatever communication channel they need to, and is all in the history, and they can then run their analysis and their reporting to see how well did they cope with that situation, and then build it into lessons learned so they know how to handle it the next time round.
Correct. And there's an interesting point you mentioned, Jack, around how public sector differs from private sector. I've seen a lot of private sector organisations, the contact centres, they want to provide a service, but maybe like to upsell or there's generally a transaction that goes on. That's why that contact centre is there. In the public sector, there isn't a transaction outside of maybe revs and taxes. But the majority of conversations is a service it provides to local people. So local constituents want to know they're getting value for money. So as they're paying their council tax, they're getting the service from the local council, or they're getting the right service. So by having the right channels that they can reach into the council with, giving the right technology to the agents so they can provide that service, so not having complex systems, having things help them out in a true omnichannel way, that local residents know they're getting value for money. And that's a big difference between private and public.
You could flip that to another vertical, which is housing associations. And there are housing associations that are out there that take on contracts for other housing associations or government bodies where they do work that they're paid for. And they need to be able to communicate with that customer base. And they also need to be able to communicate across various channels, as well as win additional contracts. And having a contact center that's an omni-channel solution means that they're different. It means that they can target more people, and they can report on how successful they are. So they can then show that they're hitting KPIs, and also use it to their benefit to win additional contracts.
And when you look at the vastness of omnichannel, right? Typically what we'd see is that voice, which is where most call centers come from before they are a contact center as such. That's still a key way of accessing the organization that you're calling, right? But one of the things that isn't necessarily touched on when you're reviewing how you operate as a contact center is voice is a bit of a bottleneck. I mean, unless you're a much more impressive person than I can only actually be on one phone call at any one time. Mm-hmm. However, if I've got the ability to use other channels, especially ones that might not necessarily have immediate responses, so things like email, things like WhatsApp, where somebody might need to contact an organization, but they're on the move. They're not necessarily glued to their phone at one time. You could take multiple inquiries through that, and you have an agent servicing, 3, 4, 5 different inquiries all at once. Whereas if you only have voice as an option, you're almost locked in at like a 1-to-1 ratio of agents to people that you can service. So, clearly that makes an efficiency somewhere, right?
100% with it. Just by deploying something like email management or WhatsApp or SMS, you can get it instantly get an efficiency gain because of the number of conversations you can have simultaneously. One thing you have to consider when you're doing that is how do you report on it? Because your first call resolution, your average handling time, your SLAs, they've been built around voice for the last 20, 25 years, is what every contact center manager knows, don't work the same way in SMS. An SMS conversation can take days to resolve because the citizen isn't overly concerned with the speed of response. It's about a non-urgent matter, so I'll message you when I get round to it. They're not looking for an instant response back, so they're happy to have a delay of 30 minutes, 40 minutes before they have the response. So how do you measure that? And by having a true omnichannel platform, you can start to track when those conversations start, where they end, how many interactions are in between, if they move to another channel on the same subject. And that helps you build the picture up. And one of the things will help you at Gamma with the support of Cirrus is how people change the way they report in the contact center and how they can still have metrics like average handling time, first call resolution, SLAs, but incorporating those digital channels.
Yeah, and we touched on planned mass contact events before, but one that I don't think we necessarily touched on was within the higher education space, and that's university clearing, right? So university clearing, thankfully, it's something that we do know happens every year. We know when it's going to happen. And when organizations, universities, conduct these events, they typically involve users who don't necessarily always sit within the contact center. Mm-hmm. So how important is it that not only the platform can scale up so that you can add on these additional users as required for these mass events, but also just the ability to pick up these different channels. I mean, you can't have a tool that's impossible to use unless you spend, a month in a deep dive session to understand how you could actually service interactions there. But on an omnichannel perspective, it has to be pretty easy to pick up across the board, not just voice, right?
Correct, yeah. The way that the Cirrus platform is designed is one of the features we look at is how the agent interacts with it. So keeping all the different channels all in the same space, works in the same way, has the same support regards to templates, the same way you change the font or the details within that. So training becomes natural. You're right when it comes to university clearing. The majority of people taking those calls are volunteers. They're just people that have either been at the university for that year or they're part of someone else within the staff, and they come in for those 2 days and help out. So making sure it's really simple, really straightforward is really important.
I think that's time for us today, but thank you for joining us. This has been our omnichannel discussion. Please make sure you come back for the next episode.